For various reasons, you might need to share your sandbox, but you don't want to share the sensitive data that you've got within the sandbox, right? For example, I've got my project here where I have a handful of sensitive files as well as a graph that contains some sensitive information hard-coded in here, right? I've got my username and password hard-coded there. I've got here an FTP address with username and password hard-coded and an API key here. I don't want to submit any of this to Clover when I'm submitting my sandbox for upgrade analysis, right? I want to know whether or not my sandbox can be upgraded safely, but I don't want to have to give away all of this sensitive information, and I don't want to have to clean it up manually either. So we have our Sandbox Sanitizer for that. What it does is it scans your sandboxes, searching for any kind of sensitive data, and then makes a copy of the sandbox in a zip file where all of that sensitive data has been redacted or the files have been removed completely. It's not touching anything in your actual sandbox. It's only making a copy and redacting the values there. As you can see here, things like API key or a file URL with sensitive data in it or a password will get changed to these redacted values here. So to get the Project Sanitizer, you're just going to go to github.com/CloverDX/project-sanitizer. There'll be a link down below. And then just from that main page, go to code and download zip. So now that we've downloaded that, let's go ahead and install it. I'll show you first on the designer and then on the server. So from the designer, we can just right click in this open space and click import project from archive directory or library, and then find that file that we've just downloaded here from my downloads folder, projectsanitizer.zip. Okay, and then I'm just going to click finish. And now we've got that Project Sanitizer here, but it doesn't work as a local project. It needs to be on our server. So I'll just right click it and convert to server project. Then I've got my server credentials there, and I'll need to name it. I'm going to create new sandbox here, Project Sanitizer, and finish. And now we've got that installed on the server and it's ready for us to use. I'll show you how to install it on the server in case you don't have access to Designer or you just prefer doing it on the server. If we refresh this, we'll see our Project Sanitizer that we just added, and let's go ahead and install it again, but from the server this time. So I'll click New Sandbox, and I'll call this Project Sanitizer 2, and create. And that's created a sandbox for us with all these empty directories. And then all we have to do is go to Upload Zip, and I'm going to overwrite existing files here. It doesn't really matter because it's an empty sandbox. And then again, select that Project Sanitizer.zip that we've got there. And it's going to go ahead and create all those files that we need. And we've got our sandbox ready to go, whether we did it from the designer or whether we did it from the server. And I'll go ahead and delete the second one because we don't need 2 instances of it. Okay, so now that it's installed, how do we use it? I'll show you again first from the designer and then from the server. So all we have to do is open this graph called runme.graph, and this is going to be our sandbox sanitizer, Project Sanitizer. And all I have to do is run it, and you'll see here that I've got 2 parameters, include and exclude. If we leave them both blank, it's going to take every single sandbox in our sandboxes directory and scan those and redact the sensitive information from all of our sandboxes. If I put anything into exclude, then it will do everything except for those. And in our situation, I'm going to do include here. I've got 2 sandboxes separated by a comma, and it's going to scan now only these 2 and redact the values from those. And that's it. When it finishes running, I have here in my data out folder a zip file with my redacted value sandboxes as well as a report about the action that was taken. It's that simple. Now, if we want to do it from the server instead of from the designer, it's just as simple. We just go in our sandboxes tab here, we find our Project Sanitizer, and then Same thing, find that graph, run me, and run it. It'll ask us again for the parameters, exclude and include. If you hover over this little I, it gives you the information about what we're looking for with these parameters, right? So again, I'll do my project 2, and run it. It'll tell us the job was started, and this one's really quick, so I know it's already finished. And when I refresh, I've got, again, that zip file with my output, which I can download here from the server. Really, really easy, whether you're doing it from the designer or from the server. And then let's take a look at what that output actually looks like. So the first thing that you're going to see is that it has a folder for each of the sandboxes that you included. And then when you click on that, it's going to have the exact same structure as a folder in your Project Explorer, except missing empty directories. You'll notice that the data in folder, which had some files in it before, no longer exists because it removes anything that's not a Clover file, like a graph or a subgraph, etc., and says we don't need these. They might have sensitive data, they might not, we don't know, but we don't need them. So it goes ahead and removes those. So no company secrets, no important user data. And then the graph, which is an important Clover file, will have been edited, right? So let me show you what it looks like in the actual code of the graph here. So on the left, you'll see the original graph, and then you'll see on the right the copy of the graph that was made and sanitized. So the first thing you might notice is that the graph parameter here with API key, before we had our hard-coded API key value, and now we just have some asterisks there. The same thing with our file URL for our flat file reader, which had a username and password inside, is now been redacted. And again, with the HTTP connector, where we had username and password, Falcon 1000, now our password here is been redacted. So it's going to go in and it's going to find any sensitive data and just remove those so that the copy has some asterisks in place of where the sensitive data might have been before. So then after the folders containing the sanitized sandboxes, you'll find some reports here. There's a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, and then a couple CSVs of the sheets inside the Excel spreadsheet. And this is where you're going to see what action has been taken with your sandbox. You'll see what's been edited, what's been removed, etc. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's inside that. So the first thing that you'll see is the Requires Attention tab, which tells us about any files that require your attention. In this case, it's these two, Java and SQL files. They're not supported. With these file types, we can't automatically redact the sensitive data, so you'll need to do that manually. Any errors that it detects will pop up here as well. So when we click on the All tab, we'll see all of the files that have been scanned by the Sandbox Sanitizer and what it did with them. So we can see for this first batch here, these are all with status excluded, which means that the file type's not necessary, so it didn't even bother looking at them and checking for sensitive data. It just said we don't need to include these in the copy. Then the next ones, this graph, we can see based on the type, we've got parameters and components, and these have all been redacted, and it'll tell us what properties were redacted. So the value of this parameter, the URL, password, username for the HTTP connector, all might have sensitive data, so they were redacted. Then we'll see, again, these Requires Attention ones that we saw in the other tab. And then there might be some files like a simple calculations graph that are unredacted, which it read it, there's no sensitive data detected, so it didn't make any changes to your file in the copy. So that's the report, and you know what's been done with your files. And now you're ready to take these sandboxes and put them into the upgrade analyzer or share them wherever you need to. Of course, after you've gone in and looked at the files that require attention and made sure that they don't have any sensitive data. And then you're good to go.